Strap on your earbuds, ladies and gents. You're listening to a full Monty version of Broken Boner Radio.
Don't feel down if you can't get it up. We all need to find the fun in being dysfunctional. It can be brutal if you've got a limp noodle. Getting hard is hard to do, but we're here for you. It's Broken Boner Radio.
Here's your host, Daniel Canfield.
I'm really excited about today's show because I have another one of my specialists in the field of erectivity, the lack of erections, erectile dysfunction, and sexuality. Today, my guest is Dr. Rose Hartzell. Doctor, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much. And I just want to give you props. I think it's such an honor to be speaking with you, but I think it's so great that you've even started this whole podcast and website, because I think it's important for us to be talking about this topic, because I think that's that we're not talking about it is often the problem that couples have in relationships.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. Yeah, it's kind of gone crazy since I launched everything just a few months ago. The dialogue I've had with men and women and with specialists like yourself. And I realize I'm kind of a lone wolf out here. I'm one of the only people that I know of, or Dr. Goldstein and yourself know of, that are willing to stand up and say, hey, I have erectile dysfunction and I've had it my whole life. And I just want to serve. That's what I'm here for. And I really appreciate you joining the conversation as well. To let the listeners know, you're a certified sexuality therapist and a licensed marriage and family therapist, correct?
Correct.
And you've got a PhD?
Yes, I went. If anyone has ever heard of the Kinsey Institute, I went to Indiana University, where the Kinsey Institute is located, and fell in love with sex research and sex therapy, and it's been my passion ever since.
Wow. Well, I feel a little bit intimidated because I see the PhD next to your name, but because I don't have anything like that. I joke around with a lot of matter of fact, I used to joke with my wife about this. I said, I have a PhD in erectile dysfunction because I was born with this. And she stopped me and she goes, honey, you can't say you have a PhD because there's probably really a PhD in erectile dysfunction. Is that true?
I mean, I think that what you're saying now has a lot of merit in that really you're expert on yourself, and people study sexuality and there's sex therapists, there's sexual medicine physicians, but in reality, you're the one living your life. So you know more about you than anyone else.
Exactly. And it's funny when I started researching, even developing my platform to speak from about this, everything I found out there in erectile dysfunction was kind of faceless. A lot of information on websites and medical things, but it was all faceless. It was like, here's the information. There's no face, no personality of anybody standing up like I am. So I'm proud and honored to be able to do this. And again, I'm thrilled that you're joining the team. For my listeners who don't know, Doctor, you've got your own little spot on our website at danielcanfield.com down in the ladies' lounge. And ladies and men, if you want to get some information directly from Dr. Rose, there's a place for you to send her an email. And we'll actually probably play some of those emails back. They're always confidential. We might even have you back on for a show that you can actually answer some of those questions, on the podcast here. So, but thank you for stepping up and being another part of my medical expert team in erectile dysfunction.
Like I said earlier, it's such an honor to be part of this.
So it's interesting. You are a part of San Diego Sexual Medicine. You're the sexual therapist, family counselor. I want to talk a little bit about it. It's interesting. It may be interesting to the listeners to know how you and I met. You actually met me with my wife, correct?
I did.
It's been a few years ago, and that was when I was going through the protocols of getting my penile implant surgery done with Dr. Goldstein. And you were a person that my wife and I had to sit with, correct?
Everyone prior to any procedure, actually anyone who comes to visit the office, we like to practice from a biopsychosocial approach, which basically just means we like to look at people as more than just their symptoms. We like to look at them as whole beings. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Goldstein deals with the medical side of things, but my job is to look at things from the psychosocial and just make sure, especially before a procedure, how everyone's kind of coping with the change that might occur following the procedure.
Well, it was fascinating because I remember when my wife and I were sitting there, and I'd been into the doctor's office several times prior, but this was like an official that we both had to be there. We both had to sit and speak with you. And I remember, I don't know exactly how this went down, but you kind of looked at Stacy. We're talking about my penile implant surgery, and you looked at her and you go, "Are you ready for this?" Do you remember that at all, or is that pretty common?
I have a recollection, yes.
And I remember my wife kind of giggling, and she goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And you go, "Well, there's women out there that facing the prospect that their husband's going to go from not being able to achieve an erection much at all, if at all, which in my case was pretty bleak at that point, to being fully sexual, fully able to have sex anytime he wants. I have to ask the women, the wives, are you ready for this?" You remember that?
I do. It's a big change. It's a big change for not just the man getting the implant, but their partner, male or female.
And I remember Stacy's like, "Oh my gosh, no, are you kidding me?" And then you expounded and tell a little bit to the listeners. There must be women out there that aren't so cool on the idea. What's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, I have to say that actually part of the reason that we work from a biopsychosocial approach was before I was there, Dr. Goldstein, the medical doctor that I work with, had to take an implant out of a man who had had an implant, partly because he hadn't informed his wife. And when she found out, she wasn't on board and said, it's either me or the implant.
Wow. Wow. So what happened? Did Dr. Goldstein remove it?
He had to remove it. And unfortunately, once you get an implant, even let's say you had erectile dysfunction, but to a degree, like you could get maybe a 20% or a 10%. Once you have an implant and it's removed, there is no, physically at that point, there's no possibility of being able to obtain an erection again unless you were to get another implant.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that, but just to hear it again and to think that a spouse or a life mate turned around and said no. I mean, because you're basically rendering your partner at that point completely.
Completely. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So speak to, Dr. Rose, speak to like the mind of the female. You say the psychosocial side of erectile dysfunction, and that's something we go into on my website is the different types of erectile dysfunction. Dr. Goldstein has helped me understand that, and I'm trying to bring that message out in more layman's terms for people to understand. But what goes through the mind of a woman? You know, what are the things you hear? What are the crushing brain and heart things that happen that they're concerned about when a man's going to go from not sexual to very sexual?
Well, every couple is different, but depending on the couple, one of the concerns could be actually that sometimes function or dysfunction serves a function in a relationship. So although couples may not admit it, they might be enjoying, like the woman might be enjoying the way that sex is going at the time. And the man is the one pushing, hey, I need to get an implant and we need to have intercourse. And there could be some fear, okay, like, hey, I like the way things are going. Now things are going to change. How do I feel about that?
So wait, back up a minute. So a woman could be happy with the lack of sexualness and penetration and all that. They're happy with that in their marriage.
Yes. Some women, I'm just saying all couples are different, but there are couples. So especially like, let's say the woman, maybe they're menopausal, and their desire has lowered, or she's experiencing pain. I mean, I can't tell you how many couples you give a man an implant and then the woman's like, can we see you as well? Because now I'm noticing that I have some sexual function problems that need to be addressed. So one of the concerns is that what was actually occurring was something they were satisfied with, and now you're kind of changing the rules. So that's one reaction that I sometimes get from partners. Another one is, okay, people might not want to hear this, but sometimes the woman might think, hey, he's not going to cheat on me. Like, what's he going to do? Kind of mentality. And then now all of a sudden he can go wherever he wants. How is this going to impact our relationship? So there can be some fear in regards to that.
Actually, my wife and I had that conversation. Matter of fact, it's in our interview. Those that are interested, there's an episode on my podcast of my wife and I talking about the communication and going through this whole process. And one of the things she mentioned was the prospect of me now being able to be, especially for me, to be completely sexually functional for the first time in my life. I was struggling with ED from the very first time I was sexual back in 1974. Just didn't know what it was. But she had those concerns like, wow, I mean, my man loves me. I know he doesn't want to cheat on me or whatever, but oh my gosh, he's now kind of bionic sexually. And is that going to stir things in me? Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a very deep conversation for the two of us.
And important to have.
Yes.
Prior to the change.
Yes.
Prior to getting the implant. Mm-hmm.
You know what? And it continues afterwards as well. My sexuality has changed 1,000-fold since I've had my implant. It's part of what brought me to this purpose, because I've understood more about me as a man, as a masculine male, and what sexuality represents for me now. I hypersexualized myself. I've said this many, many times on my platform and on my podcast, because I was always searching for what was it going to take for me to really get an erection, having no idea that biologically I've got an issue that I could try as hard as I wanted. There's just certain things aren't going to work properly when you've got what I have. So we had conversations. I've grown, you just don't get an implant and then everything's 100% one direction the next day. I mean, you've got a lot more conversations to do. And I think that's one thing that I really strive and push for in talking on this topic is conversation and communication between partners. Mm-hmm. So you meet a lot with partners?
What I like to say is, like, in terms of, so it's not like breaking your arm. I feel like sexual medicine, if the person has a partner, it involves both people. And so as much as possible, we always encourage the partner to be involved in all of the treatment of the person that comes with the presenting issue.
One thing on my website too is I've created something. I called it, I had an Einsteinian moment one day when I was driving home. I call it the theory of erectivity. Have you had a chance to see that on the site?
I have. I love it.
It just dawned on me that in our society, we have this basic theory or understanding that basically the equation is if you get a man or a woman or two people, partner, male or female partner, doesn't matter, and you subject them to this basic formula of stimulus, a sexy environment, the music, the little bit of alcohol, whatever it takes to float your boat, that if all this is congruent, the heated pheromones and all that happens in a moment, 100% of the time, the man is supposed to achieve an erection. And that's my theory of erectivity. And living my life of knowing that is so false, it doesn't happen like that. It never happened like that for me. And what does it mean to people? What happens in the brains and hearts of people when that theory fails? Mm-hmm. And speak to that a little bit. I know if you've seen it on my website, I've got the girl's the partner's brain and the guy's brain, and all this chaff that floats in our hearts and our minds.
Yeah, it's so bogus, like you said. We put pressure, and men especially, to be machines. We're all human, and different things affect your sexual function, and there's like these myths out there that men have to, in quote unquote, perform, that they have to be always and ready to have sex and orchestrated, and ultimately it kind of takes the whole passion or point of sex out, in that it's about connecting with the person that you love. It's about connection versus of your physical body, is not necessarily being in your head.
And, it's funny because this theory affects the men as much as it affects the women. Like, and I'm speaking from my own personal experiences. I mean, in my single days, I remember, and again, hypersexualizing myself. I've thrown myself into situations I had no business being in. But I was like, all right, if the last situation didn't work for me, I'm going to up the ante a little bit and do something even more sexual and more crazy. But the reactions I'd get from women were heartbreaking for me. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, it all of a sudden became about them. And I can understand that because society has taught both of our genders, there should be an erection here right now. Where is it? Mm-hmm. And, as men, I don't know if women have this. I'm not sure. But I mean, gosh, if everything is pointed to that, your erection, it's like an indicator. It's like I use an example. I don't know if you know that I spoke to Dr. Goldstein's surgical team several months ago. And I use the example of the butterball turkey you buy at the store. I'm sure you've bought those over Thanksgiving. They have the little plastic pop-up.
Uh-huh.
That's what women, and we as men look at it too. It's like, if we're cooked, if we're ready to be sexual, that's supposed to pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens, and when a lot of the nurses and stuff that were in that group were gasping. They're like, oh my God, I've done that. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're right. Why did I do that? Well, we all can't help it because we're socialized to believe that's what's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like something like that for women? I mean, I don't see that women have that kind of pressure.
Well, I mean, in terms of lubrication to a degree, but the thing is there's lube out there and you can still engage in intercourse even if you're not fully aroused as a woman. For a man, it's kind of obvious. Either you have an erection or you don't. So, right. And kind of going off to the point that you were saying too, it's like, I remember in an earlier podcast, your wife kind of mentioning that like, hey, I never really thought this is me. I always kind of knew that there was an issue with you, but I never personalized it to me. I would say that that's more on the rare side, that most often if something happens, the woman's going to think that it's not something that's wrong with their partner, that it's something not right with her.
Yeah. Like I have my diagrams on the website. It says I said or did something wrong, or I'm not attractive enough.
Am I fat? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or do my sexy parts smell? Or he doesn't like me, or my skills suck. I'm not good at this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what the women don't know is on the man side, and that's on the diagram too. I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? I'm full of fear. I failed. I'm full of anxiety. I'm less than a man. I hate my dick right now. So it's funny because it's these two, excuse the language, brain fucks that are going on in each other's minds. And how do we bridge that gap? How can we get couples to start to dialogue about this? And that's part of my platform. But from your experience, what do you teach when you're counseling for couples to come together on this topic?
Well, first off, you kind of have to start talking about it. If you want anything to change, or, I think the silence ends up being worse on a relationship than having candid conversations, even if they're difficult. And in general, I think that in life that usually ends up being the case. So sometimes the most difficult conversations we have, or the most difficult things that we do, end up being the best things that if you look back in your life, you'll say like, that was really hard, but I'm so glad I did that. And that led to great change. So if you or your partner is experiencing this, even if it's a non-issue and you're happy with the way it is, to just start, just have a conversation about it so that you both know that you're on the same page, or see if there's something you want to do to change it.
Now, I know for most men that I know, the last thing they would ever want to talk about to anybody is the fact that maybe they're struggling a little bit with their erections. The last person on the planet they would want to talk to is another woman. Mm-hmm. What tips can you give the women out there of how they can approach this topic in a way that isn't put the man on the defense, create an empathic field for the man to feel like he can come forward and at least start to open up a little bit? What are some of the tips you can give the ladies out there?
Well, I think to let them know that you care for them, and that to you that they're more than their erections. To ask them if there's anything as a woman, if there's anything you can do to be helpful, even though, especially if it's a physical thing, that there probably isn't anything that you can do, right, other than. But I guess one thing I was thinking is that it can be a cycle. So, for instance, let's say you have erectile difficulty, but you can still function to a degree. But if you're stressed out about it as a male, and then your partner stresses you out, and it's like, well, this has to happen, or your love is not showing, or whatever, it can make it worse and make it more difficult. And so it's like ends up being this vicious cycle. So the more as a woman, even if it's difficult, that you can try to just be supportive and let your partner know that you care for them and you want to do whatever you can to help, even if that means seeking some type of medical help, but that don't stress about it. There's so many other ways that we can connect.
Would it help the women out there to kind of understand, and again, that's kind of part of the graphic I put on the website, that's for women to look at the guy's brain. Like, again, I've noticed in my own experience, women internalize it was, oh my God, what am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
On my side, it's like there's two supernovas exploding, two brains, and they're having separate experiences. For me as a man, I'm panicked. I know some men get pissed off because they can't perform, and they kind of get angry. Would it help women to understand a little bit about what's going on in their partner's head?
I think it's really important for a woman to know, because then they can know how to react. And on the flip side of that, we didn't talk about this, but there's also kind of the opposite of what you have on your screen here, where anxiety, the woman's feeling like something's wrong. Also, anger that their partner has something isn't doing anything about it to change it, that they're ignoring the issue. So even if the man with erectile difficulties shares that, like, hey, this is something that I struggle with, I am doing everything I can to manage it, I still think I love you, or you're important, or this is what I'm doing to manage it, at least allows the woman to be part of the conversation and for her to be on the same page with her partner. Versus, like, I've had couples where the male has sought out medical treatment, like Cialis and Viagra, try to hide all that stuff. And the woman didn't know, his wife didn't know that this was going on, and was like, I mean, part of being in a relationship is sharing these things together versus separately doing your thing. I mean, that's part of making love.
Would it be good for the women to understand, some women understand out there, that for some men, they kind of need to do this as a lone wolf for a while and not share it immediately? Because some men just talking, well, I have a friend of mine that I suggested to go to Dr. Goldstein. I sense just from what he was telling me, and believe me, I'm no doctor, but he was telling me that, he doesn't have a problem with erections at all, but he's just kind of feeling like he's losing the zest for life. And then I says, when's the last time you had some blood work done? When have you looked at your testosterone levels and your T4 and T3 levels from your thyroid? Because all of those things crashed on me over the last 15, 20 years. And it was a simple fix. And he goes, well, I haven't. I go, well, go see Dr. Goldstein. So he made an appointment. And then he found out that, as you had mentioned earlier, as part of the protocols at San Diego Sexual Medicine, he had to sit with you. You probably don't know this. He canceled the appointment.
Wow.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, dude, you can't sit and talk to a woman doctor? He goes, no, not about my sexuality. Nope, won't do it. And I was astonished. I mean, I'm a different kind of guy. I've grown up with this, so I've always had to find ways to compensate and be more open to things. But he's a very typical male that just says, like, no, if I've got to talk to a woman about this, no way. I'm not going to go. And it just shocks me. So it's like, I'm sensing that for some men, they need to do this lone wolf, at least for a while, but you wouldn't condone that, correct?
I mean, they could come in by themselves, but what hearing you say is that just talking to a woman in general was too difficult about his sexuality.
We got to change that, doctor.
Yeah, that just got me really sad. That, like, I mean, that's part of the problem. And honestly, I think that's part of I think that it's strategic that, at our practice, which I would say is, we see all different types of sexual dysfunction, but I would say, like, erectile difficulties is the one thing that we see the most of. I don't think it's accident that I'm a woman and therapists that they need to talk to. I think part of the process is if you can talk to me, a stranger, a strange woman, about your deepest, darkest secrets about your sexuality, then who can you not talk to?
Right.
That in itself is therapeutic.
We just got to get more men out there. And again, that's part of while we're working together, is to open this dialogue up. And, I think if men see a way, a lot of men have to see it. They have to be taught. Women too. I mean, just as human nature, if we see somebody do it, if we have an example of how to dialogue about this topic, and hopefully that's what, we can do together as a team, and Dr. Goldstein and the platform and all the podcasts that I'm putting out there, is sharing with people that we can actually open up and talk about this damn subject. It's like, it's real. You know, I like to point to, and you may have a completely different feeling on this or different angle on this, but I try and help men understand and women understand that just as women cannot avoid menopause, you're all going there, right? You're all headed towards that point where you're going to lose the ability to have children. Most men, according to what my conversations have had with Dr. Goldstein, most men as they age are going to start to develop erectile dysfunction in one shape or another. Not all men. You know, there's going to be the 90-year-old guy out there who's, you know, Hugh Hefner. Or Hugh Hefner may have, who knows. But my point is, if I'm trying to help women have an empathic field too, that guy, you know, it's the same kind of thing. In men, we need to grow with an understanding that because you were a stud when you were 20 does not mean you're going to be a stud when you're 40 or 50 or 60.
Well, and what's a stud? Like, that's the other thing is like, what's our definition of like our expectations of our erections, and like, what is, like you were saying, manliness, or what is masculinity is
right. And the theory of erectivity, and why is that so important, and what does it mean when it doesn't work that way? And the knowledge is power. Again, that's a part of the whole dialogue that we're having. We're almost wrapped up here, Doctor. I loved having you on. Is there any other words of wisdom you'd love to give to the men or the women out there? And again, we'll have you on again, but just anything, what we spoke to, you want to circle back around?
I guess just don't let this be the elephant in the room, that the more that you can have conversations, the more that I think our society in general can just be more open about sex, not even just about erectile dysfunction or difficulties, but just in general, I think the happy and healthier relationships that we'll have.
And there's more to erectile dysfunction than the pills, right?
Dr. Goldstein will always say, I can help you get a hard penis, but that's it. If we had an equation for that, that's like one part of an equation towards sexual satisfaction or happiness, and that it's not the whole equation.
Yeah, it's amazing to me the more people I interview and talk to that had no idea I was doing this, and they're like, oh, erectile dysfunction. Yeah, you just take a pill. Like, end of conversation. That's it. That's all they know. Big Pharma spent billions of dollars on advertising.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's 10 million different things that we can do. The pill is the first step.
Right.
Medically, there's no reason. If you want to be treated medically, there's always something we can do to help.
Exactly. Well, again, Doctor, I thank you for joining us. I want to tell the listeners we're now on iTunes. So everyone go out there and subscribe to iTunes. It's brokenbonerradio.com, and you can like us on Facebook. Doctor, I can't wait to have you back again. Look for Dr. Rose on the website in the ladies' lounge, and you can reach her at drrose@danielcanfield.com is the actual email if you want to send her some questions. But again, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much for doing this.
Okay, that's it for today. I'm totally spent, and people, I need to go take a nap. If you would like to call and leave a question or comment for the show, 405-592-6637. That's 405-59-BONER. You can find me on Facebook at Broken Boner Radio or danielcanfield.com, or you can even follow me on Twitter at Real Broken Boner. I want to give a shout out to my production team at podcastfasttrack.com. Carrie, you know I couldn't do this without you. And I can't wait to talk more about my erectile dysfunction with all of you in future episodes. In the meantime, keep it real.